you mentioned an 18-month development cycle. That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
Just having to wait that long, keep people engaged for that long. How do you go about designing a game? It's like, okay, I'm going to do trekking through history. Is it based on the same concept as trekking in national parks? You're not like reinventing the entire wheel all over
No, for
again?
trekking
Or,
the world was based a little bit about trekking national parks. Trekking through history is a completely new game concept.
completely new game.
Completely new game.
So you guys just all sit
Yeah.
around the table and do some psychedelics or
I
something, come up with
wish.
these ideas?
I
Or, I
wish.
mean, like,
We're
how does that, cause how about that creative? That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not that creative either. You can ask my team. I am not the person that comes up with the games. We actually are all remote. That's even harder. It makes the process
Oh,
so
wow.
much harder. We're a completely remote company. So the process we came up with was essentially mass iteration. It's really the only way that we could figure out how to create a game consistently well. So the head of my studio, Nick Bentley, he's a phenomenal game designer. So we separated out the company essentially into the operations and then the studio. The studio is the creative side. It's similar to our video game model. Like
Okay.
Riot Games and the Riot Games studio.
Hmm.
What it does is allows them to have more autonomy and create a culture around just the creativity, because creativity works differently than operations. Creativity is run differently than operations. You have to have your own systems, your own processes, your own authority. So the head of the studio, Nick, created a process where you had Nick and Charlie, the two people in the studio at the moment. They worked full time for the first. I want to say. I mean, I can't tell you the exact timelines and stuff. I don't know it that well off the top of my head, but the format, the structure is correct. So let's say for 4 weeks, they both created their own versions of. They were creating. I think it's 6 weeks actually. They created their own versions of the game. So many
Like
many
separately,
versions.
without talking to each other.
Separately,
So like they
yep.
get,
And every
okay.
week they would test their games against each other. And they would, I think they might have done it more than once a week. I don't know how often they tested, but they would just test the test. Then they would compete against each other, see who won. And then they would take the feedback from each other, the team, and we would have testers come in from our community, our audience. Our audience would help us test these games out. And then the next week
Okay.
they would create new versions and they would keep doing that. And then each of them would pick a winner that they like of their own versions. Or I think it could be the other person's version, doesn't matter. They would pick a winner. And then they would then take that the core of that game, and for the next 6 weeks, they would iterate on that version. They would just stick to that version. They wouldn't they wouldn't change the core. They would stick with that core and just keep iterating on that version. And for 6 weeks, they just kept competing against each other to see who's winning those versions. You take feedback. Then like candid feedback is the most critical thing in any creative development process. If anyone's listening that has a creative driven business, like similar to like books, movies, podcasts is one of them, I guess, TV shows, anything like that. Creativity Inc. is the greatest book on managing creativity I've ever read in my life. It's the story of
Interesting.
Pixar and the
Okay.
whole story of how they manage creativity. And the whole core of it comes down to candid feedback. If you don't have honest feedback from everyone on the team and respectful, you have to give feedback with love. If you
Yep.
don't have that, you cannot create great products, because if people get hurt from feedback, they don't receive feedback well, or they don't give feedback well, the honesty is gone, and you just cannot improve the product because there's too much pride in the way and too much feelings in the way. Can't do that. You have to establish ground rules for feedback. Make sure everyone understands it's not personal. The feedback should not be about the person. It should be about the product and the idea. And the person that's receiving the feedback also has to understand that they may disagree with the feedback. So this is a common thing that we say. You can disagree with the feedback, but you can't change how the person felt.
Yep.
So we play a game, right? And so I might give feedback, and this is not great. This is not a good way to give feedback, but I might give feedback like, hey, that turn, I was getting really frustrated. I think you should do this to the game. Now, as a person receiving the feedback, I don't have to listen to their solution. If they say, I think you should do this, I don't have to listen to that. But I do have to understand, I do have to accept that they were frustrated. I can't ignore what they felt when they played it. I can ignore their suggestions. If I want to, I can try to find another solution out of it, but I can't ignore the way they felt. So that's a huge part of it. If people are playing the game, they're feeling a certain way. You can't ignore that. The solution, that's up to you to figure out. You have to figure out how to solve it. So we focus on that. And then after that whole process, for those 6 weeks where they work on their own version. The last step of the phase is they pick a winner. They get to a point where they like this is the game, and then they both develop that game together over the next couple of weeks. And you just keep developing it until you think it's correct, and then it's the whole art and everything else after that. So that is the development process for a game.
It's such an arduous process, and I mean, we're in this world of instant feedback, and
Yeah.
it's something to wait 18 months. It seems like so like 1982 or something, because everything happens in real time these days.
Everything happens in real time. Our stuff is also different because we're trying to make a game around a specific topic, and that's harder to do than just creating a mechanic. Games can be created overnight if they're simple enough, or if the idea is perfect. But trying to create a game around a specific theme, and theoretically, one of these days we might try to create a game around a theme, and the first game idea that someone comes up with is perfect, and then now it's 6 months instead of 18 months.
Right? Maybe
that can happen, but it's hard to plan around it.